Hey, in this video, we're going to talk about some of the other heddle bars. And these heddle bars are heddle bars that make patterns with one yarn. Some of the more advanced heddle bars make patterns with multiple colors at a time. They are not harder, but there's a few more things to think about at any given moment. So we're going to start with these. I've got two of them here. They make a twill and a diamond. A twill is a pattern where it's a diagonal that goes one way or the other. Denim is a twill. If you look closely at your jeans, you'll see a diagonal weave. It's a little sturdier than plain weave, and it's used in a lot of fabric. The diamond is the twill pattern with a variation, and we'll see how that works when we get to it. When I weave these patterns, I generally put in a few rows of plain weave at the bottom. Otherwise, these patterns do not pick up all the warp threads at the bottom, so that when you take it off the loom, there's funny loops and unevenness. And to put in a few rows of plain weave just ensures that you have a nice straight bottom edge. So let's put in our heddle bar. I do this in the same way that I put in the plain weave heddle bar. The name is on the left, the number is on the right, and you slide it in. You push it up against the bump, which should align it, and you slide it in. If it doesn't align it right away, give it another chance. It should find it and do its thing. So you will see that the twill heddle bar, different from the plain weave, has 4 positions, 4 numbers: 1, 2, 3, and 4. And you can see that instead of picking up every other thread, it's picking up pairs of threads and lowering pairs of threads. So that's what creates this twill pattern. The other thing to note about these heddle bars, and I think every heddle bar that I've designed except for the plain weave, it has something different, which you will notice, and that is the floating selvage. So if we look at the edge of the shed, you will see that that last thread in these row of warp threads is in the middle. It's half height. It's not the bottom, it's not the top. That's your floating selvage, and it's on both sides. And the reason that's there is to allow you to choose either going above or below, and not forcing you to either go above or below, because sometimes when you're weaving, especially if you're using more than one color or you're changing directions in a pattern, that last thread will be up when you want it to be down, or vice versa, and you'll miss it when you turn back and weave the other way for your row, and it'll leave a gap. So floating selvage, that's big loom stuff, but I've built it in here because I think even though it's a little bit of an extra step to remember at the beginning, I feel sure that you can handle it. And it makes everything a lot easier and gives you a lot more freedom down the line. So let's look at how that works in real life, the floating selvage. Okay, so I'm going to use some of this fat, fluffy yarn again because I love it. So I've got a wooden tapestry needle this time. I still like to fold over the yarn to pass it through the eye. Makes it a little easier to grab. And then the other thing I like to do is to just tie a simple knot once or twice, tying the needle into the yarn, and that way it doesn't pull out when you're pulling it through, which does seem to happen to me a lot. Okay, so the floating selvage, the best way that I've arrived to use it is the same for anything I weave. And what I do is I go under it on the way into the row and over it on the way out of the row. And so let's do that. I'm on position number 1. Okay, and then the thing with the floating selvage is you do the exact same thing when you're going in the other direction. You go under on the way into the row and over on the way out of the row. And what that does is, because You went over on the way out before. Now you're going under on the way in. And that means that you're catching, you went over here and you're going under here. So that means you're catching that last thread. Let's do it again. Under on the way in, over on the way out. Again, I'm making the little hill and pushing it down. Under on the way in, over on the way out. Make a little hill, push it down. Okay, what do you notice about this that's different from the plain weave? That is our twill pattern. It is formed when in those pairs that are being picked up and lowered and then shifted over one for each row. So you're getting this nice diagonal. I'm going to do a couple more just so that twill pattern gets good and formed. Under on the way in, over the floating selvage on the way out. That's kind of a big gap there. Okay, and just like the plain weave, you don't have to start at 1. You can start at any number when you're weaving, doesn't matter. You don't have to go this way. You can go in reverse. So it goes 4, 3, 2, 1 or whichever. The only thing that's important if you want to form this pattern is that you go in order because it's the order that makes the pattern. Here's the cool thing that I think is cool about this heddle bar. When you reverse the direction you've been going, the pattern reverses. Let's look at it. So we're on 2. We're going to go back to 1. We're going to go under on the way in, over on the way out. That's where I hear that at night in my dreams. Going to go back to 4. Under on the way in, over on the way out. Let's do one more. Under on the way in, over on the way out. This yarn is getting kind of raggedy. I think I used it and unwound it once before. And there's the reversing pattern. So you're actually getting the diagonals going in the other direction when you reverse, and it makes a chevron. So do you have to do the same number? Like, so I've done 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 rows here and only 3 here. Do I have to do another 6? No, you can reverse again. I think I'm going to reverse. Ooh, I only have about 1 more row in my thread. And you can see that it's going to start to go the other direction. So as far as I'm concerned, you can reverse directions as much as you want, and it'll get really zigzaggy. Here's a piece that I've woven this section with twill, and I've gone back and forth a few different times. I think that looks really cool. If you use a colored warp thread or a colored yarn instead of this more neutral thin thread, you will see the spaces, you will see those lines, the zigzaggy lines will show up even better because you'll see the warp threads between them. Okay, so now I want to show you the diamond. So I'm going to take out the twill heddle bar and put in the diamond one. And just with as with everything else, we're going to put it in with the name on the left and the numbers on the right. Now, once you've started weaving, it can be a little fussier to switch a heddle bar because the warp threads aren't so nicely lined up anymore. And it may take you a little bit of time to get them fully lined up. However, I can usually make it work. And if you can't, just put it in with some of them in the wrong place and kind of pull them into the right place. Okay. So I've got a new color loaded onto my tapestry needle. And I'm going to start at 1. There are 4 positions for this one. Again, you can really start anywhere. You don't have to start at 1 as long as you go in order, either frontwards or backwards. So I'm going to go under on the way in, over on the way out. And I'm going to advance it to 2, under on the way in, over on the way out. I love these needles because they pass really nicely through that gap. Got my little hill. I go to 3, under on the way in, over on the way out. And 4, under on the way in, over on the way out. I'm going to do 1 more. On the way in, over on the way out. So let's look at what we're seeing in the pink yarn. It's diagonals again, but it's 2 diagonals and they're heading toward the center. So if we reverse it and go to 4 instead of, go back to 4 instead of forward to 2, let's see what starts to happen. Back to 3. Back to 2. What's happening is that those are not, the diagonal's no longer going in, it's going out, and so it's making an X. So let's reverse it again. I'm going to have to add some new yarn. Under on the way in, over on the way. Oops, what is that? A lump. When I'm switching colors, or switching, adding a new piece of yarn, I usually just leave 5 or 6 inches. Let's see. Oh no, I've forgotten which way I'm going. Yes, under on the way in, over on the way out. And that makes it easy to weave those in at the end, and we will do that. Under on the way in, over on the way out. And there is your diamond. So depending on when and where you reverse, you'll either have that X or you'll have the diamond. And you can make these as big or as small as you want, because you could weave 2 or 3 rows and then reverse it, and you'll just have a little tiny diamond in the middle. So here are some examples where, like here, I've done a very long diamond, many rows to make this diamond before I reversed. And the other thing about this one is that it has pink yarn as a warp thread, so that really makes that pattern pop. I think that looks really cool. And then this one has a purple yarn as the warp thread, which again makes it pop. And then the other thing I want to show you about this one is that right here, I've sort of gone rogue and just done, I decided I wanted to see if I could make it look bad. So instead of going in order, either front or back, I went totally random. Like I went 1, 3, 2, 3. And honestly, I think it still looks pretty cool. It almost has this weird Space Invader-y look. So one other thing I want to show you is, this whole thing is diamond actually. And up here, what I've done is a technique called bound weave of opposites. And it gives this awesome, like, friendship bracelet type look. And I'll show you that in another one of these videos. So I think there's nice potential with these heddle bars, especially if you wanted to make like a patterned center section and then have the top and the bottom sections be a plain weave. Or you wanted to have a twill section that then goes into a diamond in the middle and then another twill. But also if you just weave with the twill or the diamond the whole time and you just mess around with reversing, you'll end up with some really cool experiments. One other thing to note is that in these heddle bars, I've built in a little bit of plain weave at each edge to give it a more finished look and to avoid like unevenness or gaps at the end. So that's why it looks different there. And it may look a little chunky with some of the ways that the yarn is turning around. But I think ultimately it's neater than it would look without it. Okay, you guys did great. I hope you enjoyed learning about those heddle bars. Any questions, let me know. Next, we are going to learn a couple of finishing techniques. I will see you in the next one.